This show is about giving people their flowers, man. And I don't think we got really close until later in the tenure of us being at Tennessee State. But you never know who's watching you, man. And I knew when I saw you, I'm like, this dude different. He like carry himself like he don't need an entourage. It's just him. But when he's walking, it's an entourage. It's like he's like a force. And it's just like, who this dude, man? Like he like popping, like straight up. This is somebody on the outside looking in, seeing this aura around you. And then you run from this TSU, I'm like, oh, he lit now. And then to see you progress into your career and, you know, all things you've done. And then when you run for alumni president, I'm like, this is like destined. Like, I just knew this would happen for you one day. I just didn't know it was your inspiration or goals, you know what I'm saying? So to hear that you run from this TSU, I'm like, that's you. Here you TSU alumni president. It's like, this is like what he does. And like I said, this show about giving you flowers, watch you from afar, watching you grow. You are in the places where you're supposed to be, your path, you blazing it. I'm inspired, and I just hope that the young kids and the younger generation are watching, because you are it, man. You are needed, and we appreciate your service.
Thank you. That means a lot. Like that touched me. Thank you.
Hey, now I got definitely tested school. You definitely had an entourage with you. You had them chicks with your boy. I was like, I was not a popping.
So you always got to keep a baddie with you, because that's what I told someone. I was like, you know what? It's ladies' night every day. If I'm trying to get in, I got to roll with the baddies.
Stella, you talking about your sister? So she has like a star, like she discovered a star for NASA.
Yeah, so she was in an internship with NASA her senior year, and so she was given a star, and so she had to name it, study it. So she had to do all the configurations of how far it is and all of the stuff that I don't know. I just be like, there's a star up in the sky. I know the constellations, but like she knows like the how much gas the star has. It was pretty cool. It's dope.
How was that conversation? You going from a predominantly white high school to a HBCU? Like, so was it pushing involved? Like, hey, Charles, this is where you going? Okay, sis, here I come.
God is good. So let me tell you, God, now you're about to get me in another zone. But when I tell you that my sister and I are very connected, we're very close. I had a dream, not like Dr. King, like I had my own dream. I had a dream, and she had a dream the same night.
Wow.
And I called my sister and I said, guess what? I had a dream that she's like, I know you're going to TSU. And that was how that went.
Wow.
There was like, I didn't think of anything else. Like I said, I had no other option, no other choice. I was not going to Tennessee State University until I had that dream. And when my sister said, I know you're going to TSU, I said, okay, that's what it is. And so I've always, when I tell you every move that I've ever made in my life, God has told me about it. It will be in a dream, even down to living in New York. I was walking down the street in 2008. I moved out here. I started the contract in 2012. I was walking down the street and I just paused. It's like almost shocked me. And it was like, you live here. Wow. And I just completely felt comfortable with the thought of me living in New York City. And I never, that wasn't even in my brain. And then in 2012, the opportunity to work in New York City came, and I was like, absolutely, because I already knew it was coming. So like that's how that went. It was really a dream. And I mean, no plans, no other choices. It was a dream. And then I started doing the work to go. Similar
to kind of your story, I didn't have a dream, but being born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, coming from a small kind of, like it was 108 people in my class to graduate. I was number 14. You know, I'm like, oh, I'm popping. Like I'm number 14. I go to these other schools. They like, oh, I'm like a 3.8, but I'm like number 300 and something. I'm like, oh, so it matters. You know what I'm saying? Like numbers matter. But I wanted to go to a big school. So I told my parents, I'm like, man, I'm going to UT Knoxville. And I'm like, it's like 8 hours away. Like it's a big school. They be on TV. Like I want to go there. And, you know, I come in the house for playing ball one day. my auntie, my cousin there, and they like, where you going to school? I'm like, man, I waited on my application come back from UT. They was like, you ever thought about going to HBCU? And I'm like, nah. They like, the class would be here. I'm like, nah, they be shooting at the class. Like, I ain't going there. It's crazy. So she was like, but it's like you won't be a number, financial aid, like kind of holds your hand, and the classrooms are smaller. And I'm like, okay, I'm waiting on my application to come in the mailbox, my acceptance letter. And it's like, just put in the application to TSU and see what happens. Man, I swear, 2 weeks later, check the mail, Tennessee State in mail. I'm like, what is this? You've been accepted. I'm like, man, they called somebody. I went to orientation. I said, leave me here. TSU is popping. Forget UT Knox. I ain't waiting on that no more. So to your point, it's just kind of cool to hear people's stories on how they end up at a HBCU. It's never really like a goal of ours. Years ago, now HBCUs are popping. People want to go there because of the hype, but it's like we were like, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna try it out. But it's just cool to hear your story, man, and having a dream. That's dope, man.
What about the teaching to keep people out of trouble in the state of Missouri had New York adopted? I don't get that. So go over that.
So when you start looking at juvenile justice as a whole, the whole goal for us is, of course, as the word says, is to have justice for our youth. And, our youth are sent to these correctional facilities, and a lot of times they're overbooked. They have about 200 to 300 kids in them. And so in Missouri, we had a facility called the Boonville Correctional Facility. And at one point in time, that was one of those facilities that had over 200 kids in it. And so when you have that, you have higher chance of abuse. You have higher chance of kids coming into the program learning worse behaviors because they're having to fit in. So you may have had someone who had a small crime, they stole something, in there with someone who attempted murder. And so what happens is those kids that have lesser crimes have to defend themselves against the kids that committed larger crimes or that are in gangs. Because again, like in Missouri, so imagine Missouri, a lot of people are like, well, what goes on in Missouri? Missouri, first of all, St. Louis is the murder capital of the world. And so when people think about Missouri, what people forget is that what happens when you get ran out of the East Coast? You migrate to Missouri. What happens when you get thrown out of the West Coast? You migrate to Missouri. So a lot of the crime that happened in the North, the South, the East, and the West ended up in Missouri. And so our crime was really high. And so what we had to do, this happened about 40 years ago. They decided to break down those systems and put the kids into smaller homes with about 8 to 12 youth and put them back in their city. Because what was happening was they were sending them to Boonville with a rural staff. So you have these kids that have a lingo from the city, and these staff from the rural communities, they don't know how to interact with them. They can't develop the relationship, which is what's important to work with youth. And so what they would do is they would abuse the kids to get them to mind. They would put the kids against each other to get them to conform. And so the Missouri approach, again, focuses on smaller groups so that we can, if it's their birthday, we can celebrate their birthday. If there's a death anniversary of someone that they love, we can be aware of that and we can provide them therapy. So the smaller the amount of members in the group, the more attention you can give them. And so instead of them just doing their time and getting out, what they do is they're able to do their time and receive therapy, receive treatment, do things that kids do. We do music therapy. We do. I actually performed at Carnegie Hall through this approach. My program did a CD with a program with Carnegie Hall, and we actually performed at Carnegie Hall. And so my whole thing was, they're like, these kids don't want to do this. I was like, watch. Okay, so you do a verse, I'll do the hook. You do a verse. So like I was literally in there in the studio working with the kids, and some of the staff are like, the kids don't want to do this. This is whack. They don't want to do it. I was like, okay, watch me work. So that's my job. My job is to show them how do you work with kids. And so we produce albums, and there was the first album that we produced, I'm on it singing a hook, because that's how I had to engage them to be excited about it. Because I'm like, well, I got a hook. You got a verse. So that's how we did that. So yeah, so it's all about group therapeutic approach.
Man, you hear the saying, like, when it comes to a child, you want to meet them where they're at. Like, yeah. So like it's a whole bunch of older people pointing at children, you should do this, you should do that. In my day, if you meet them where they are, then you can get to them. And it sounds like what you're doing is getting to them now. So that's awesome. And Carnegie Hall, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You had a tux on and you come on.
We came as we came as we are, because again, the kids didn't have that. So we dressed them up. But that's also a cool, I think it's kind of cool to do things like this, because this is a side of me that people don't get to see, because they usually see the dressed up me. They don't see the down to earth and the me that goes in there in my sweatpants, that goes in there and just in a t-shirt and a button up, because the goal is to, again, not make them ashamed of their circumstances. So again, they can't afford certain clothes. They can't dress like what we would think is appropriate for some of those spaces. So we teach them to do the best that they can with what they have. And so in order to help them, we have to do the same. So I couldn't go in there with my tux, because I would have went in there with the tux, have my bow tie popping, but I went in there and represent with them. So yeah, it was a cool experience.